The moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerfherder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
Time for leftovers.
No.
Yeah, I don't have any leftovers. Unfortunately,
you couldn't bring them back in your suitcase.
No.
Yeah. Do you see the news where the guy's cat was inside his suitcase, and they only detected
he didn't know.
They detected it when it went through the X-ray machine. I'm like,
How could he not know his cat is in his
I don't know. You think right? The cat like crawled in there. It's like, nope. Cat's like, I'm going to Florida.
How have you packed your suitcase in a way that you don't notice that there's a cat in there?
I don't know.
Do you know what I mean?
Maybe he did know it was in there. I don't know, but TSA, they found it. They're like, what?
Is he a husband or a father that doesn't like animals? He's like, I'm sticking this in here, and this is going to grandma. I'm going to say, oops, I didn't know that was in there. Looks like it's staying here.
She wrapped the cat again. Yes. Cat's got some frequent flyer miles.
The cat held his tongue, apparently, because he didn't make any noise.
All right, enough Thanksgiving talk. Thanksgiving's over. Christmas is on its way. Although I will say that technically, I did not see Santa at the end of the parade, so Christmas is not coming this year.
But did Santa not show up, or you didn't watch it?
I had to leave like the last 10 minutes.
If Santa didn't show up to that Macy's Day Parade, then we have a problem.
Yeah,
everybody's looking at their watches, like he should be here any minute.
Where is he? Where is he? No, we had things to do. We had to leave, and I'm like, but Santa's coming. I gotta watch him. So we did see Santa in the mall, but he wasn't in his chair. He was walking from store to store, and the kids and I are like, don't you like? It was not the real Santa.
He's not a mall employee.
He's pretty busy this time of year. So maybe he was shopping. I don't know.
So welcome, everybody. We hope that you had a great Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And hopefully you listened to our Thanksgiving episode last week, wherever your travels took you. But today we are back, and we are talking to whodunits. And this is Christina's happy place. She's already smiling.
I have no notes because I know there's not a single, once again, there's not a single thing I can bring to this table, especially this first movie, which is so steeped in Agatha Christie. And I'm like, there is nothing that I can bring to this.
Well, it's a really fun watch, this first movie.
I agree with you.
So I don't think you need to know anything about the background to enjoy this, you know?
But there are a lot of name drops. There are a lot of references. I think even some of the character names are references to other Agatha Christie. Yeah. So if you are even somewhat invested in those mysteries, this is a very special treat.
Yeah.
There's so many references in this movie, and the whole movie I'm watching it, I'm going, this is that. This is from this. This is from that. Like, and my husband and son, who has spent enough time with me and have sort of like been in the room when I've been watching Poirot or whatever, are like, hey, isn't that from blah, blah, blah? So even they picked up on
After
a few
while,
things because they've just been around me enough to pick up on things.
So have we. I was experiencing the same thing. Before we get into it, what we're talking about is See How They Run, which had a brief theatrical window, but mostly it's been on HBO Max exclusively. So if you have HBO Max, seek it out, watch it, especially if you haven't seen it yet, because
we are going to spoil it.
Yeah. They actually asked us literally to not spoil it, but I think that we are. So
you can't not talk about it.
So go watch it if you haven't seen it yet. We're also covering Clue, which is the 1985 cult classic now. It wasn't so much when it was.
It wasn't so much when it dropped.
But I posed a question last week, and according to what I'm seeing out there, it is the first movie based on a board game. a movie about a chess player or a mahjong player doesn't count. It's got to be based on the game. There's been plenty of movies about players.
So we can blame this movie for Battleship?
Because, yes, I pulled up something because I was curious. Was this the first movie based on a board game? So I pulled up some article about, 7 biggest movies based on board games. And like The Queen's Gambit is in there. I'm like, that doesn't count.
We've been promised a Monopoly movie for quite some time. But no, this is cool. This is the Parker Brothers game that came out in 1949. We all played it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still play it. Yeah. Well, Mike, we have the Simpsons version. Mm-hmm. So when we were watching it the other night and we were trying to remember like all the weapons and all the rooms and all the names line up, but the rooms and the weapons change in the Simpsons version. Mm. So
yeah,
but we'll get
which
there.
They do. If you have any specialized Monopoly, that's the same thing where all the streets aren't the same and the pieces are different. But that's it's fun.
So, but that's on the back end. Let's get into see how they run. I find this title
wait, don't we have any news?
I have no news.
No news. Okay.
You want to talk about Iger stepping back in as Disney? That's all I did. I didn't even want to talk about it because at this point it's whatever. It is what it is. I don't know. I got nothing to bring to the table.
Yeah.
I would like to recommend if on that note, though, if people are interested in a breakdown of what appears to have happened, there's a podcast called The Disney Dish with Jim Hill and Len Testa. And actually, if you're a Disney fan, you should be listening to this podcast anyway. Jim Hill is sort of a Disney insider. He's been covering Disney for a long, long time. Len Testa is affiliated with the Unofficial Guide to Disney World and Touring Plans, if you're familiar with those things. And they did a breakdown of kind of what they had heard from people on the inside in their most recent episode. So if you want to know kind of what went down, listen to the most recent episode of Disney Dish.
All right.
I like it.
So see how they run.
Yes. Now, what were you going to say about this title, Jeff?
I just thought the title is very nondescript. It's not. Nobody runs.
Multiple references here.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So
multiple.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
But the Beatles figure into none of them.
No. No.
Or Pat
so this is multiple references. So first thing is that the original title of the Mousetrap, the play that's inside this film, was Three Blind Mice. And if you know the nursery rhyme, Three Blind Mice, see how they run. Okay. So there's that. And then the other thing, it's also just kind of a broader reference to Agatha Christie because a ton of her books are named after nursery rhymes. Hickory Dickory Dock, 1, 2, Buckle My Shoe. She has like a bunch. She uses these nursery rhymes as titles for a lot of her stories. So it's just sort of I think it's a reference to Three Blind Mice. And it's also, which is the original title of the Mousetrap, which had to be changed because there was another playwright who'd written a play called Three Blind Mice. Huh. But also, I think just sort of a generalized reference to the fact that Christie uses nursery rhymes in a lot of her stories.
Okay. One of my favorite books by her is A Man from Nantucket, by the way. Sorry.
So did we see this recently? The reason I asked that is because it's been on HBO Max for several weeks now that, on this date that we're discussing it.
I watched it last week, so it's about as fresh as it's going to get.
Mm-hmm.
I watched this 3 times. I enjoyed it so much.
Yeah.
Were there 3 different endings?
No, there were not.
That's a huge miss.
I already put my cards on the table at the very beginning. I wouldn't have watched it 3 times if I didn't really enjoy it. And it is a fun watch. The characters are likable. Even the murder victim, who typically is the least likable character, you love the guy.
Well, he narrates the things.
Yeah, well, he narrates it from beyond the grave. So what's not to love about that? And you know what I love about this, and Christina, I'm sure, can speak to this more fluently than I can, is that it exposes and admits the tropes of a whodunit while perpetrating them.
Yeah, no, it's very clever because it's very self-referential.
Right.
Literally, at one point, one of the characters says, what are we going to do? 3 weeks later? And then, the screen comes up 3 weeks later. And you're like, all right, I see what you're doing here. So, yes, it is a lot of fun.
At the beginning, he says it's a whodunit. If you've seen one, you've seen them all. And yeah, I mean, there's a formula. They use that formula to their advantage, I think, in this film. Just as a side note, because the whole plot sort of hinges on this. In the film, the producer is getting frustrated because they can't make a film of the play until the West End production has been closed for 6 months.
And we've come across this before with Arsenic and Old Lace.
Right. And that was written into the terms of the contract, but The Mousetrap is the longest running play of all time. It has never closed.
So Wolf would still be waiting to this day to make a movie.
It's been running for 70 years. There was this clause that it couldn't be turned into a film. And the rights have actually passed to the heirs of the original producer.
Are they producers themselves?
I don't know.
I hope so.
Matthew Pritchard, who's Agatha Christie's grandson, actually owns the rights to the play. She gave it to him as a birthday present.
Thanks. That's awesome. I mean, as probably a 9-year-old, you're like, what am I going to do with this?
Right. And
well, that's like writing a hit song that just keeps giving royalties.
Yes. Yeah. And he still owns the rights. And actually, side note, it's going to be on Broadway for the first time next year.
Really? The first time?
Only been
for the first time next year. I think it's probably played in, smaller productions, in the US, Broadway. But like this is the first time it's going to be on Broadway next year, 2023.
Okay. So just to clarify, so you're saying in the real world, this has never been turned into a theatrical movie. This has never been filmed.
It's never been filmed. Okay. So that's sort of the central tension of this film, See How They Run, is that this producer wants to make the film. Leo Kopernik is the director, and he's American, and he comes in with a very American sensibility. He doesn't seem to understand the way British country house mysteries work because he seems to want to make something completely different.
And everybody is aghast at his ideas. Especially the writer, the producer, not so much. The writer,
the writer, Mervyn was the writer.
Mervyn Cocker Norris, played by David Oyelowo, with wonderful relish.
He is fun.
And I think one of my favorite lines is when he says, "I think he thinks denouement is French for shootout."
You mean a stop?
There's so many great actors in this, known and maybe not as well known. Adrian Brody plays Kopernik.
With relish, by the way.
Yeah, he is.
But yeah, he shows up and he is the narrator, as Jeff already mentioned, when the play opens. So he gives like a lay of the land. So it's a bit of a surprise when he is the one that's killed because he keeps narrating.
He keeps narrating.
And then he comes back at the end as well to wrap things up.
Saoirse Ronan plays a very enthusiastic constable.
Ooh, she gets exhausting halfway through this movie.
I think she's adorable. I
agree with you. But there, those scenes with her and Sam Rockwell, Stoppard, like when they're in a car, and I'm just like, this woman's insufferable. She just keeps going. She's like,
well, you can see how much she exhausts him.
Yeah, no.
Well, it's not. He's 3 sheets to the wind anyway, so he just wants to go to sleep.
Yeah.
But yeah, her name is Constable Stalker, which I thought was hilarious as well, because that's what she's doing to him.
Yeah, you got Stalker and Stoppard. He's like trying to stop her. She's
Stoppard is another reference.
Okay.
It's a reference to Tom Stoppard, the playwright, who wrote a play called The Real Inspector Hound, which was a parody of The Mousetrap.
Boy, we're digging deep.
This is this is like an onion, layer upon layer upon layer. But Kopernik is the director that wants to bastardize The Mousetrap. So he gets into a fight with the lead actor, Richard Attenborough, who is, a fictional version of Richard Attenborough.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to get at, which is, he's a real actor. We know who Richard Attenborough is. So,
and he was he originated the role.
The role.
Yeah.
In real life.
This is very, very layered. This is,
So he gets into a fight because he's hitting on his wife at this after party for the Mousetrap. So you see him backstage and he's in the props area and he's trying to look for a change of clothes because he's got food all over his clothes after this fight. And this is where he's killed. And the funny thing about this death is that he's trying to fight the killer with all these prop weapons, which, these pots that just break when he picks them up, sees an exit door, he opens it, brick wall. It's a fake exit door.
And the look on his face when he sees the wall is priceless.
Yep. He gets hit with a ski first, And then he gets hit with a sewing machine because it's in the wardrobe area. So that's why there's a sewing machine there. But he's killed. And classic whodunit, pretty much everybody has a reason for killing him. So, the spotlight shines on various people throughout the movie, like, oh, no, it must be him. No, it must be her, as we finally get to the actual killer. And it
wasn't that hard to figure out.
Now, as a moviegoer, you're kind of programmed to look for the person you should least suspect is usually the one. The journey getting there is fabulous. And I think in no small part because of the chemistry between the two lead actors, which is Sam Rockwell doing an amazing job as Stoppard and Saoirse Ronan as Stalker.
He really is so underrated.
Sam Rockwell, he should, as far as I'm concerned, he should have every award under the sun. I've never disliked this man in a role.
I mean,
even when he plays reprehensible
Jojo
characters.
Rabbit, right? He's a despicable character, and yet you still like, this guy's fun.
And he always brings a layer that's sort of under the surface. He's a very, very nuanced actor. Yes. And I think that maybe his nuance is too subtle for some people. I don't know, but
I absolutely adore him. I think that, go all the way back to Galaxy Quest, very under the radar.
Watching this 3 times, you start to see how the filmmakers are pointing at the murderer throughout. Because when Kaepernick is narrating at the beginning and he's telling you about all the tropes of the whodunit, one of the things that he says is, the detective normally points his finger at the least likely chump. And as he's saying that, you see the usher, Dennis, accompanying Petula backstage, and the camera's right on him. And during various parts, as they're bringing up the identity of the killer, he shows up. So it's like they're pointing at him to reward you for future viewings.
But they tried to, there's a lovely subplot where Stalker jumps to conclusions.
Right. He's like,
as she was told not to do, and decides that Stoppard is actually the killer, even going so far as hitting him in the back of the head with a shovel and having him arrested.
Well, to her defense, she sees him over the body of the writer after he goes back to his seat in the theater to get his gloves, and then he runs from the body. So anybody would think the same thing.
All right, this guy's it.
Instead of the fact that he was checking the body and then running to see if he could catch the killer. But,
I'm on her side with this. So I'm firmly on her side.
They'd also layered in something earlier where when Dennis claims to have seen somebody and he can't describe the guy physically. And
did he do something suspicious?
Right. Yeah. And then Stalker asks him, like, how big was he? Was he about the size of the inspector?
Yeah.
And he says, yes. He was, so they kind of try to start pointing you in that direction, fairly early on, so that you start.
Yeah, sure. Listen, if I was the killer, I'm going to say, it looked just like that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they go from one suspect to the next. Well, that means this person must have done it. At some point, the writer, because he was overheard saying to Kaepernick, "I will kill you," just because they were fighting over the script.
That never goes well.
They suspect him. And then towards the end, they suspect his quote unquote nephew, who he lives with, the taxidermist, has a very dark personality, apparently, and is prone to anger. So they assume that it's him at the end because that's who Stoppard thinks that he's chasing when the writer's actually killed. He thinks that maybe it's a lover's tiff or something. So the movie kind of spotlights all these people until it's on Stoppard himself. And now this was, after repeated viewings, this was the plot hole for me, because the reason that Stalker suspects him to begin with is because they get a clue from the writer. There's a woman that shows up at one point to Kaepernick's hotel room with like a 13-year-old kid. That was the plot hole for me, because this is his illegitimate son, I assume, that is this woman's son. And she tells Stalker that somebody who had a village idiot accent was harassing Kaepernick when they went to the theater. But yet Kaepernick is served by Dennis multiple times at the beginning of the movie and doesn't recognize him. You would think that if Dennis was stalking him, that he would know that it was Dennis that was doing the stalking at the beginning. He was just the help at the beginning of the movie. Did I miss something, or is that a legitimate plot hole?
It's probably a plot hole, but
I'm giving it to you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to spend too much time thinking.
Maybe, I wouldn't have noticed that if I didn't watch it 3 times. I'm like, wait a second. He should know Dennis then.
Or maybe he does know him and he enjoys treating him like garbage at the party.
Yeah.
Because this guy is very prone to anger, this Kopernik. So you'd think that he would say something, but.
Or maybe he's giving him, so much money to get his bottle of booze. Thing like, here's your money, go away now.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
So there's so it could be a plot hole, but I think you could also make an argument that that part of the reason why he treats him the way he does is because he's dismissed him. He clearly doesn't think anything of these accusations.
Yeah, I just going off what I see, and you're not really told that. So tisk tisk.
Well, the one nice thing about this film is that it's probably exactly the right length. Unlike so many movies, which seem endless.
On. Yeah.
So they just try to show you, just enough, which is really the way a Christie book is, where she kind of shows you just enough. But then at the end, all the moving parts are usually revealed by Poirot or Marple or whatever. You have to have everybody gather in one location in order for this to happen. And here, everybody is given a fake invitation to the house of the authoress herself.
Yes, Christie. Let's go.
Played by Shirley Henderson, who is my favorite actress.
Unmistakable. And what's funny, because one of the times I watched this is when I was on vacation over Thanksgiving, and someone from the other room said, "Is that Moaning Myrtle?" Who wasn't even watching.
She has such a distinctive voice. Actually, if you've never seen Topsy Turvy, she's also in that, and I love her in that movie. It's a very small part. It's very funny because she clearly plans to poison the murderer. She comes in with all the cups of tea, and then somebody tries to help her and messes up her order because she's, got everything just so, and she's planning to give this cup specifically to Dennis, who has stormed the proceedings so that he could be mad.
Yeah, because she's got, I don't know how many guests there were, but she's got several cups of tea on this round tray, which acts like a lazy Susan when she puts it down on the table. So she slaps somebody's hand, but it still turns. So unfortunately, it's not Dennis that gets the poison, but it actually fulfills Kopernik's prophecy at the very end, which you see, not the last shot of the movie, but the last shot before we get to the denouement.
Right. His storyboards.
I love the fact that the storyboards literally that's how the movie ends.
Yeah. Even with Hank Williams playing them out.
Yep. Yeah. No, this is very super quirky, but it's a lot of fun. Like I said, if you are entrenched in this world, you're going to be delighted at all these little nods.
There's a few references. There's a lovely reference when they're going into the hotel room and Stalker asks the concierge what part of France he's from. And he says, I'm Belgian, right?
Yeah.
Because at least once per book, someone tells Poirot he's French and he says, no, I am Belgian. Mervyn Cocker Norris actually lives in the building that Poirot lives in on the TV show.
Oh, get out of here.
Yeah. And even my husband was like, isn't that Poirot's building? And their names on the dentist's office were actually the ones that really got me, because if you've never read Christie stories, you will not catch this, but Norman Gale is the dentist in Death in the Clouds, and Henry Morley is the dentist in 1-2 Buckle.
Serious deep cuts going on here. That's crazy.
Bringing up that dentist scene, this is one of my favorite things, not because of those Easter eggs, but because at one point, Stopper so badly wants to get away from Stalker that he lies to her because they're staking out the producer at this point in the movie because the suspicion is on him. And they're waiting for him to show up. And Stoppard leaves and says, he lies to her. He says, "Oh, I forgot I have a dentist appointment."
It just runs away.
And then he goes to the pub. And then she catches him because the producer comes like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes later. She breaks her pencil because she's trying to write everything down. And then she has no recourse but to go find him at the dentist, to find Stoppard. As she's ringing the bell at the dentist, he comes out of the pub and there's a very awkward moment. And then they both go in to interview the producer, and he's trying to get on her good side again, saying, "Oh, she's got an encyclopedic memory, this one." Suddenly he's taking an interest in what she likes and she's having none of it. And I just love that scene, that tension between the two of them.
Right. I also like how she uses the dentist's excuse later when the commissioner shows up and Stoppard hasn't arrived yet.
Yes.
So.
Now she's lying about the dentist for him. And that's a great scene because she's trying to make conversation with the chief inspector. And she just says, because they're outside the theater. And she says, "Did you see the mousetrap?" And he says, "Oh, yeah, of course. I knew who did it right away." But then he starts talking about his wife. She was baffled even after the chap explained it all. And then he says, "It was a trying night for all concerned. I'll stick with flowers next time."
Yeah. I'm not wasting my money on this. And I do like those inspector, constable, commissioner.
And at the end, he's like, he was given a knighthood or something. And then, Stoppard only got a medal for his efforts. But yeah, it's fun. It's really fun.
It is a lot of fun.
Every single character is a joy to watch.
I do like the use of split screens that they employed numerous times throughout as well. It's very, very clever.
And then when the big reveal, that Dennis is one of these siblings that the mousetrap is based on, and abuse in the British childcare system. And all is revealed, and he's at Agatha Christie's house because he sent out these fake invitations for dinner. And that's a great thing, too. As they show up, her husband is very confused, like, "Oh, did you break down, too? Or I guess we're having dinner."
Yeah.
And as they're all taken hostage in the living room, before Agatha actually shows up, they're pushing the butler to steal his rifle. And you see the butler's hand slowly coming into frame because he doesn't want to do it until Agatha finally comes in. And I thought that was laugh out loud funny as well. Great movie. I really, really liked it.
It's so much fun. I think Harris Dickinson does a great job as Richard Attenborough. He actually captures his diction really well, I think, which is sort of the key there. It's not that he physically resembles him so much, although he does sort of superficially resemble young Richard Attenborough, but I think he does a really, really good job. And Lucian Samadi, he plays Max Mallowan. He was also on another detective show, and I'm wondering if they cast him because of this. He was on the HBO adaptation of the #1 Ladies Detective Agency, which was on years ago. I was so happy to see him, even if it was in a small part. And Ruth Wilson, who plays Petula, she's such a great actress, but always love her because she's my favorite Jane Eyre. Just a really, really good cast across the board.
It is. And you're carried along by the cast. Speaking about the actor that plays Richard Attenborough, Harris Dickinson, just these little scenes they're very subtle, but if you catch them, they're very rewarding. He asks Stoppard how you got a slight limp, how did you get that? Do you mind if I take that? I think it's interesting when a character has a physical defect, just insulting him. And then later, before the writer is strangled in the lobby, when Stoppard is watching the play, he notices Attenborough has a limp, and he actually says, "Excuse my limp. I was, this happened in the war." And you see like a look on Stoppard's face, like, what? This is just filled with those little subtle touches that just reward you. And I think you'd want to watch it again. I heartily recommend it. Buckets, I think I'm going to go 4 1/4 with this.
Wow. Nice.
Wow, Jim, you love this.
Yeah. 3 times. I mean, you've seen it 3 times. I'm not going that high. I'm going to go 3.5, but I really enjoyed it as well. I thought it was fun.
And I'm going to say 4 because I enjoyed it, but also just as a Christie fan, there was so much in here for me. I'm sure if I watched it around the second time, I'd see even more stuff because the first time you watch it, part of your brain is engaged with trying to solve the mystery. So yeah, this is great. This is really great. Heartily recommend.
A lot of fun. Very clever.
Put the popular author down, please, Dennis. It's probably my favorite line. So, okay, let's go to the concession stand and we will be right back with Clue.
Ooh.
Who done it? Where? And how? Clue. Solving this mystery can be murder. Risk. Risk. Win the game and you win the world. Clue and Risk. Parker Brothers kind of fun.
So, okay, we are back from the concession stand and we are talking Clue. Now, as I said previously, and as Jeff also mentioned, now this is the first movie based on a board game. If you know otherwise, please let us know. But as far as I could see, this is the first movie based on a board game, and this paved the way for such classics as, yes, Battleship. So I'm not sure
that old chestnut.
if we have this to thank or to blame. Do you think?
Well, I think the quality went downhill. Really
do you think
quick
that
after
Real
Clue.
Steel could be considered a board game movie? Because that
Based on
is
what?
Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
That is true. You do straight up make that reference.
Yeah.
It could be. Yeah. I don't think it was.
But still, it didn't come before this. That did
It
not
wasn't a
come
Parker
before
Brothers
this.
sanctioned movie, so technically no.
The other thing is there's a logic to turning this into a film. Okay. It's a mystery. So it's very easy to just extrapolate. And again, going back to those murder mystery tropes, you have an excuse to gather a bunch of people at a large house in a remote location, and then, hijinks ensue. And I think what's interesting about this film, this came out in 1985, and I guess the winds were not quite right for it because it was a flop at the time. But it has a kind of old-fashioned quality to me, kind of a callback to like those sort of cast of thousands movies from the 60s and 70s, where every actor in this ensemble is well known. Like if you
correct.
had watched anything from the previous 10, 15 years, you would know all of these people when you went to the theater. You wouldn't say like, who's Michael McKean or like, who's Madeline Kahn? And of course, all those Agatha Christie adaptations, the ones with Peter Ustinov and Albert Finney, they all had, well-known actors in them. So it just kind of has like this, this slightly old-fashioned quality that I find very appealing. But I guess audiences at the time were really not on board.
Now, I think it gives off, especially in, first 15, 20 minutes, a real young Frankenstein vibe.
I agree with you. I'm going to Murder by Death, which came out in 1976. All the characters were literary characters, Marple
Right.
and Agatha Christie and whatnot.
But there's a lot of silliness
Oh, absolutely.
is inherent in the beginning of this movie, from Tim Curry, stepping in the dog crap and wiping it off and everybody smelling it, as
a
he
running joke,
approaches them.
Yeah.
And then again, the dogs come into it when Mr. Green arrives, Michael McKean, and Curry says, sit. And then he sits. It's like, not you, not you, sir. So there's some laugh out loud moments at the beginning of the movie, but I think it just gets weighed down with its own plot. At one point, I stopped even attempting to follow this. Maybe it was because I had just gotten off the 12 a.m. flight coming home from Florida. I'm just going to let this wash over me and enjoy it. I'm not thinking too much about it.
I don't want to think too much about it. It's just a silly.
I wasn't following the plot like I was for See How They Run is another way to put it.
I don't think you really need to, because again, we're going to talk about it. There's 3 alternate endings. So none of it makes sense. You can, theoretically, there was a 4th that they filmed, or I guess that was talked about, but never actually executed. Every one of those characters could have been the murderer.
I think that sort of speaks to the randomness of the game.
Yeah.
Where you just by luck of the draw, you end up with a bunch of people, a bunch of these cards inside this envelope that, you're supposed to, by process of elimination, break down. And I think the plot is sort of purposefully opaque because there's no real clues for you to follow, which is interesting. Yeah. So, but I think you're just supposed to enjoy all of these characters, and the sort of increasing stakes as a bunch of people come into the house and they're trying to hide the bodies and all this other stuff. So something that's interesting is about 3 weeks ago, I actually saw a stage version of this in Chicago at the Mercury Theater. And it's basically the film, which tells you that the film is almost written as a play. They really didn't have to change a lot to make it into a play because it's just things that happen in rooms, right? They're all in this house and they're just sort of going from room to room. So there's very few changes they had to make to change it from the film into the play. In the play version, they used the ultimate ending of the film.
So ending A, as they call it.
The one for everybody. The one
where everybody's guilty except for Michael McKean.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Green, who is hysterical in this, by the way.
Yeah.
Although Tim Curry kills this.
The best part of the movie is when Tim Curry does the summary at the end. Like you're almost just waiting for it. Like maybe I should just fast forward to the part where he does that. The other thing is if you were in the theater and you saw one of the other endings, you never got to see Madeline Kahn say flames.
Yeah.
Flames on the side of my face. Which is very sad for some people.
Yeah, well, that's the fun of actually having it on disc now. I think every version is available. You can choose to get a random ending, or you can watch all three of them.
The background of this is more interesting to me than the actual movie because some theaters, I guess they were labeled the prints that they got of what ending. Some theaters chose to advertise what ending they got. So I guess they're trying to jockey against other theaters. Like, well, if you saw it in this theater and you got ending B, come see it here and you'll get ending A, And I think that was the intent of the filmmakers by doing this. Well, maybe people will see it 3 times to get all 3 endings.
Yeah, I don't think that translated.
People actually saw it 0 times.
But you mentioned it before, Jim. There's these clever little throwaway lines. Whatever. At one point, Madeline Kahn's talking to Yvette. She's like, "Is there a bathroom?" And she's like, "Oui, madame." She goes, "No. I just need to powder my nose." And it's like, stupid, silly stuff like that. Who would kill the cook? Food wasn't that bad. This stupid stuff. But these characters. It's more about these characters and how they interact with each other. We need to bring up Christopher Lloyd. I'm assuming we all played this game as a kid.
Yeah.
This was huge. I mean, we still play it. Like I said, at the beginning of the show, our family, we have the Simpsons version, but as a kid growing up, we played Clue a lot. It's an easy game to play. It's fun, trying to outsmart each other. It's not Monopoly where you're playing for 45 straight hours, but always Professor Plum for whatever reason for me.
Yeah. The lead pipes seem to come up a lot for me playing this.
Yeah, I was disappointed because the lead pipe in the movie is not bent like the actual pipe in the game itself. But we were trying to go through all the rooms, and I do. They even went to the extent like the secret passageways go from the rooms that are on the board game. They do correspond. If you played the game as a kid, you find it kind of clever that all the characters have the names. Mrs. White, though, she's all dressed in black. I did see that they got rid of Mrs. White in subsequent games. She's now replaced by Mrs. Orchid.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
I guess my edition is not that recent.
I don't know when they did that. And it probably was like, at this point, every person on the planet probably owns a copy of this game. So they had to just change it up. I don't know if it was luck of the draw. They just decided to get rid of her. Which one it was?
Yeah, I was reading that in some editions that Mrs. White is actually pictured as a maid. When you look at the box and they're on the cards themselves.
Interesting. Complete with a feather duster.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think this is fun. Did you pick up the guy whose car breaks down? That's Hendrix from Jaws.
Yeah.
1 and 2. Jaws 1 and 2.
Yeah, he wasn't busy. Mr. Dreyfus for Jaws 2.
The singing telegram. That was Jane Wheadland.
Jane Wheadland. Yeah.
I thought,
she's got like a 2-second cameo
because when she gets shot, I'm like, that looks like Jane Wheadland. And then when the credits roll, I'm like, I was right. That was her.
Yes.
It's directed by Jonathan Lynn, and I think he's actually credited with the screenplay, but the story was developed by John Landis. It feels like a Landis movie to me. It feels like his humor that comes across in a lot of this. Yeah, and there's just a cast of really professional, funny people in this. People who are just really good at doing comedy.
Oh, yeah.
Eileen Brennan, man.
Martin Mull, Howard Hessman coming in at the end.
Howard Hessman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Repent. But yeah, I think Tim Curry just absolutely steals this movie. I'm sure there's people out there, this is their favorite Tim Curry movie. He definitely steals it.
They were actually considering Rowan Atkinson as the butler.
I would so buy into that.
But he wasn't, well known over here. But Tim Curry, I totally give it to Tim Curry.
I don't know. Listen, there's a lot of Mr. Bean fans out there.
Yes, there are. So this was released in December of 1985. So it was pushed during the Christmas rush. But like we said, nobody went to go see it. It cost $15 million to make. It made $14 million at the box office.
So close.
So close. Yeah,
so close to getting your money back.
And I really like how they tipped their hat in the credits. Clue is a trademark of Parker Brothers for their world famous board game. And that's how they call it in the credits. The world famous board game of Parker Brothers. I'm like, are they contractually obligated to say that in the credits?
I think globally it's known as Cluedo.
Yes.
It is.
Yes, it is. Carrie Fisher originally was going to play Miss Scarlet.
Miss Scarlet.
But she was having substance issues at the time, so she could not do it. Critics were not kind to Clue, I think.
What'd Roger Ebert think?
Well, I didn't write down Ebert because Siskel was more pointed than Ebert in this case. A lot of characters running around on a treadmill to nowhere. It needs 3 different middles instead of 3 different endings.
But meanwhile, that's the thrust of the game, is that you're just running from room to room to make accusations. In that regard, I think they nailed it.
Right. And again, I think the plot is sort of deliberately opaque because they don't actually want you to try to sort it out because they've come up with these 3 endings, which seem kind of random. And, it feels to me like a reference back to the board game. But if you, aren't thinking about that, and you're thinking about, you want a film that makes sense, you probably won't get that. But I think it's worth just enjoying for the fun of it. Not necessarily as a mystery, but maybe more as a comedy.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, as I said, I just, turned off my brain at one point. Where I started to find issue with it is that all the characters, you couldn't take anything they said at face value because they were turning on themselves 3 or 4 times throughout the movie, especially Tim Curry. Like he's one thing. Oh no, I'm really this. Oh no, I'm really that. I found myself focusing more on Leslie Ann Warren's décolletage than anything else.
I think everyone was a little more focused on that. That was another running joke.
I want to note that this is a Deborah Hill production. Deborah Hill, who produced Halloween, who produced The Fog, who produced Escape from New York, who was Carpenter's real life partner and then producing partner for years and years. She was a legend, actually. She was a real groundbreaker in Hollywood.
Yes. All right. So what kind of buckets would we give, out of 5 buckets, what kind of buckets would we give Clue?
I'm giving it the exact same as the first one, 3.5.
3.5.
3.5.
I'm going to go 2 3/4 with this one. It was funny in parts, but not really my favorite.
I'm going to say 3 just for the sort of fun and the nostalgia factor. There is something very delightful in seeing people who know what they're doing just do it well. Madeline Kahn is always a highlight. My favorite line in this movie is the communism was a red herring, which appears in all 3 of the endings.
All right. So what else did we do this week?
Well, I'm not going to talk about the film itself, but I went to see Glass Onion this week.
Oh, you saw it already? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I want to talk about this for a second. I think Netflix is blowing this. Netflix should have this film released in the theater for the next month. Because
only
I
one
went
week, right?
Yeah, it was 1 week only. I went to the Wednesday 12:30 p.m. showing. So that was the first day it was in theaters. the theater was almost sold out. Like there was just the front row, there was a couple of seats available. So the middle of the week, the middle of the day, not even like a prime time, and there was a ton of people in there. I think they should have a longer theatrical release. They paid Rian Johnson $200 million for these the next two films.
The next two. Okay.
So
still, that's a huge chunk of change for a director.
Why wouldn't you give this a longer theatrical release and try to give yourself an opportunity to recoup some of the costs? I'm observing this because this goes back to the song I always sing about how there's no mid-budget films released for adults in the theater anymore. And the theater was full of adults who were clearly just delighted to be at a film that didn't involve lasers or fighting or explosions. So
there's none of that in this movie. Is that what you're implying? Superheroes.
And everybody in the theater was really responding to this. If you have a chance to see it in the theater, I think you should try, because it's one of those things where some of the delight is experiencing the surprises with other people. My son was the youngest person in the theater, but he was also the youngest person in the theater when we saw the first one.
And meanwhile, he's probably schooling half those people. You know what that reference is, right? Yeah, no, this is getting a really good buzz, and it's unfortunate, like you said, because it does not drop on Netflix until 23rd of December.
Like a month. So
you now have a three-week window where it's no longer in the theater, and you have to wait for it to show up.
Yeah, obviously they're trying to get subscribers, but this is a proven commodity. The first Knives Out was a huge hit, so this is a franchise that has been successful. So I think you're right. I think it wouldn't have hurt them if they put it out for a month and then put it on their streaming service. I think that they'd be successful getting new subscribers in that scenario.
Correct. Even stronger word of mouth, because how many people, you're coming off Thanksgiving going into the Christmas holiday. How many people really have the time and energy to go and invest in a theater right now? So, yeah, give it some time to breathe. We'll see.
The original film was also released around Thanksgiving, because I think I actually went to it the day before Thanksgiving for the last film as well. And it did really, really well, because this is sort of a lull period too, in terms of releases, because a lot of things come out right around Christmas. So I just think they're crazy that they haven't, committed to a theatrical release for this. They could make some money back. That's all I'm saying.
That sounds like a lot of change right there.
But I won't say anything about the film.
You won't divulge?
Discuss it. Yeah.
All right.
We will be covering it. So I watched on HBO Max A Christmas Story Christmas, which is the sequel to A Christmas Story, which again, we talk about these movies that didn't really do well when they first were released. That movie bombed.
I saw it in the theater.
Did you?
I saw it at the Imperial in Wappingers Falls.
I used to love that theater. Oh, now I'm sad.
So this is obviously 40 years later, whatever, 30 plus. So Peter Billingsley, who's made a career out of being a director, but he's Ralphie, grown up Ralphie, and his little exploits as a grown dad with two kids. And if you're a fan of the original, there's a lot of lovely callbacks to the original movie. And it is a very, very sweet love letter to his old man, who Darren McGavin, and we know, is no longer with us. And they address that. Julie Haggerty plays his mother. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. Again, nothing too awful shocking or surprising. He does a fun, narrative voiceover, just like he did in the original, although that wasn't him.
Does it erase the memory of Christmas Story 2?
Well, that is also on HBO.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen that. Just like Halloween erased all the other Halloweens after 2. So that's it. Like I said, nice little callbacks to the original if you're a fan. Going into the holiday season, it was fun.
I also watched something on HBO Max, the latest Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, which was a 4-hour odyssey. But there were some real fun moments. Duran Duran was inducted, and we did talk about Andy Taylor, unfortunately,
Yep.
a couple of weeks ago. So that was an emotional moment. And Dolly Parton was inducted. So they saved her for the end. Now, I can't think of a more wonderful human being on this planet than Dolly Parton. Pink inducted her very respectfully. It went through her career. And at the end, this is the big takeaway here. There is usually like a jam session. That's normally how these things close out,
Right.
these induction ceremonies. So everybody got on stage. So Judas Priest was also inducted. So they
Okay.
performed.
Yeah.
Duran Duran, as I said, Eurythmics, they were inducted as well. So everybody pretty much that was there joined Dolly Parton on stage to sing Jolene at the end, including Simon Le Bon and Rob Halford. So she opens the song, she sings the first verse, and then she says, "Take it, Simon." Then he takes the next verse, and then at the end, for the closing chorus, she shares the mic with Rob Halford. So it was an amazing sight to see. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yeah.
I see she's got a new movie. I don't know if it's on Hallmark Channel or whatever.
I think it's on NBC. I saw
Is
the
it on
commercial for
NBC?
a million times this past week. Yeah.
You mentioned she is amazing though. The amount of work that she does behind the scenes, giving money to people. That's cool. It took her this long to be inducted?
She didn't want to be inducted into the Rock and
No.
Roll Hall of Fame. She felt she had not earned it.
Because she
Really?
wasn't a rock and roller, but she actually addressed that when she did the speech. Like she said, she didn't really understand now
Why?
that she was there and she saw like Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and Eminem being like, this isn't just rock and roll. This is like an
Right.
accomplishment. And, and now I'm very honored to be here. But she did say, I did write a song for the occasion and it's a rock song. It's like it was a 2-minute thing about how she grew up with Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richard. And it was actually pretty good. It was a pretty good number before they did Jolene. She played that.
But yeah, she didn't. I saw this because when her name initially came up on the ballot, she asked to be removed because she felt she was a country singer and that, she didn't want to take a spot in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame away from someone she felt deserved it. So
Fair enough.
just always being so just modest, I guess, about her career and her influence. I mean, if nothing else, she's influenced even if she doesn't think of herself that way, she's influenced so many rock and roll musicians. So, I think she'd belong there just on that basis alone.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool.
All right. So what are we doing next week?
Ooh, I'm actually excited about this.
We're going back to the theater next week for a new release, and it's Disney, Strange World. Now, this has been on our radar for some time because the trailer, so as far back as Death on the Nile, did we start seeing trailers for this thing?
Maybe.
Quite a while ago, but
It was
I
a
think
while ago, yeah.
what's really, really weird about this is I haven't seen any trailers for it in the last month or two, which is when you'd think they'd be ramping up their marketing for this. And I'm sure we'll talk about this next week, but I think it's affecting their opening week numbers. I don't think enough people are aware that this film is even out.
It almost feels like Disney's kind of underplaying this, and for whatever reason, who knows what they're, and again, maybe it's the shift in management at the top. Once again, we're getting these animated movies that are getting shafted, or at least it's getting a theatrical run.
It is, but I saw that its
it-
box office numbers were not great this weekend, and I genuinely think it's that people aren't aware of it because normally family films do really well, especially on a holiday weekend.
I have seen some advertisements for it, but like during the Macy's parade, more kid fair channels. So I don't know if they're just.
And this might be a tough sell because I know that, Jeff, especially, you're fans of the late 90s kind of Disney output of your Treasure Planet and things like that don't have the accessible little kid characters. These are, adventure stories, and maybe it's not being marketed to the right audience. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
I know is that in the months leading up to the release of the last Minions movie, I saw that trailer at every movie I went to, whether it was a film for adults or kids, but I've not seen a trailer for Strange World in the last 2 months.
Well, you now have the Minions are a known commodity, and when you do the opening for Regal, they're inserting the Minions into the roller coaster ride as you're leading into the Regal logo.
I just bring it up because I think that Disney has not pushed this film. That's all.
No, I agree. Yeah. Well, I guess we'll get to the bottom of it next week.
And along with it, we're delving into another strange world, the human body.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no.
Along with Raquel Welch, I might add, in Fantastic Voyage. I forgot the title for a split second there.
I thought that was a dramatic pause.
It wasn't. It was
he
not.
got all caught up thinking about Raquel Welch. That's what happened.
Speaking of bodies. I just got a notification. Mine's my copy's waiting for me at the library. So
it's on HBO Max.
It is. Yeah.
Whatever. I
probably it's probably high def too. You might do well to just watch it on HBO Max.
It's a go-to now. I just automatically go to my library. So that way I'm not screwed at the last second scrambling trying to find this thing. So cool. I'm excited.
Yeah. So that's what we have on tap is Strange World and Fantastic Voyage next week.
I'll be there.
And so will I.
So will I. We hope you will too.
Yep.
So thanks as always.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. If you like what you just heard, be sure to follow TMI Confessionals of the Nerd Kind on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or whatever you listen to your favorite podcasts on. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and then share it with your fellow movie nerd friends. It means the world to us and helps our listenership grow.
You can also find us on all of the socials, Instagram and Twitter at TMI_podcast 2018. We're on Facebook and YouTube as well. Just look for the Popcorn Bucket.
You can help support this show by visiting our TeePublic page for some TMI branded goodies such as hoodies, t-shirts, mugs, and stickers. TeePublic.com/TMI Confessionals, all one word.
A 5-star review would be incredibly nice as well. I'm just saying.
Thanks again for listening. We truly appreciate you. Be sure to come back next week. We'll save some popcorn for you.
Save your sneezes until I hit record.
No.
You think that's what the listeners really want?
They really want to hear me sneeze.
Yeah.
Yes. That tissue is actually going up on auction later. So jump on it now, kids. Christmas is coming.
That's a quality sneeze.
It is a quality sneeze. It was. I jumped.